In this section, we will discuss a lot about OAuth2 framework, which is the most standard and common authentication and authorization framework followed by many organizations. So before we understand how OAuth2 framework works and how Spring Security framework will help us in adopting the OAuth2 framework, let's try to spend few minutes on understanding what are the most common problems that OAuth2 is trying to solve in the authentication and authorization flows inside any application. The very first and most common scenario that OAuth2 framework is trying to solve is the sharing of the credentials of the user over the network unnecessarily can be stopped by using OAuth2 framework efficiently. If you use HTTP basic authentication between client and backend interactions, we may end up sharing the credentials again and again over the network for each and every request that you are going to make to the backend. And at the same time, this will also force the backend application to execute the authentication logic unnecessarily for each and every request coming from the client. And most importantly, we ended up sharing the client credentials over the network unnecessarily each and every request between the client and the server. So these kind of issues can be avoided by leveraging the tokens like JWT or session IDs that we have looked in the previous sections. Similarly, OAuth2 framework also leverage the token based authentication where the user are requested to enter the credentials only during the initial login, but later on they don't have to enter or pass the credentials every time to the backend system. The OAuth2 framework will leverage the token based authentication and authorization to make sure that we don't have to share the credentials every time between the client and the server. Moving on to the scenario 2 where OAuth2 framework is trying to solve is, think of a scenario where my EasyBank application is maintaining 3 different independent applications like for different apartments, loans, cards and accounts. So in this scenario, though your end customer is common for all these 3 applications, you ended up following 2 approaches. One is you will ask your customer to register separately in all these 3 applications either with different credentials or same credentials. Under such scenarios, you ended up maintaining the authentication and authorization logic in 3 different applications and storing the client related credentials information in 3 different databases. At max, you can avoid saving the credentials in multiple databases and you may follow saving them in a single database. Even in such scenarios also, your applications will have duplicate logic defined in all of them. Either it might be authentication flow, authorization flow, security standards. So everything will get duplicated in all these applications. So OAuth2 framework also help you in these kind of scenarios by adopting a common authorization server inside your applications. That means all your authentication and authorization flows will be kept separately in a different server, and that server will be leveraged whenever you try to authenticate and authorize inside any of the application used by the organization. Similarly, the last scenario that OAuth2 framework is trying to solve is, think of a scenario where you want to use as an user an application called Tweet Analyzer, which is built by a startup. So what this Tweet Analyzer application will do is, it will try to analyze all my tweets, retweets, likes, comments that I'm putting inside my Twitter account and give some statistics to me. But in order to use that, if my Tweet Analyzer app is not using the OAuth2 framework, they will ask me my Twitter credentials to enter inside their application. I will end up entering my actual Twitter credentials, which will be used by Tweet Analyzer app to interact with the actual Twitter to get my tweets information from them. But again, here we have a very serious problem, which is I'm sharing my credentials, Twitter credentials to Tweet Analyzer app, which is a serious security concern. What if Tweet Analyzer app misuses my credentials? What if they tweet on my behalf using the backend APIs of the Twitter? So all these kind of scenarios can be avoided by following the OAuth2 framework. And again, we have n number of scenarios that will get solved by OAuth2 framework. And you can see in the coming lectures how beautifully the OAuth2 framework is built, especially to answer our requirements related to authentication and authorization. I hope you understand what are the most common problems that we face during the authentication and authorization flow. Now, let's try to understand the basic details of OAuth2 framework in the next lecture. Thank you and see you in the next video. Bye.